Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into something a little different today?
Different good, I hope.
Oh, definitely good. Fascinating, even. We're taking a deep dive into a piece of French literature.
Ooh, French literature. Always a good time.
But here's the catch. It's not a sprawling novel or a complex play. We're focusing on just a few lines from a poem.
Just a few lines, huh? Sounds like a challenge. I'm intrigued. What's the poem called?
It's called Je me dis.
Je me dis. Okay, that sounds familiar. I tell myself, right?
You got it. And in these few lines, the poem manages to pack a punch, raising some pretty thought-provoking questions about how we perceive and experience the world.
Well, now I'm really curious. Let's hear it. What do these powerful lines say?
I'm going to let you do the honors. Give us the poem, in French, of course. Let our listeners appreciate the beauty of the language.
All right, here it is. Quand tu t'assois et tu penses, si tu peux penser, tu penses à quoi? Moi je regarde, je réfléchis, et je me dis.
Beautiful. Even without understanding the words, you can almost feel the rhythm and the flow.
Absolutely. There's a certain melody to the French language that lends itself so well to poetry. But for those of us who aren't fluent, a translation is definitely helpful.
So let's get to it. What's the poem saying in plain English?
Okay, so it translates to, when you sit down and you think, what do you think about? Me, I watch, I reflect, and I tell myself.
Wow. That line, if you can think, is really something, isn't it? It's suggesting that thinking isn't a given, like it's something we might not always be capable of. What's your take on that?
It's such an intriguing way to frame thinking, isn't it? It makes you pause and consider what thinking actually means in this context. Is it about actively engaging in problem solving, dissecting situations, the kind of mental gymnastics we often associate with thought? Or is it hinting at something deeper, a state of being where thought might not be the dominant force?
It's definitely prompting us to dig deeper. And then there's that contrast between thinking and watching. The poem seems to present them as two distinct ways of experiencing the world, almost like there's a tension between them.
Right,
Yeah.
they occupy different spaces in our consciousness, and that's where it gets really interesting. Is the poem implying that watching is a more passive act, while thinking requires conscious effort? Or is it more about the direction of our attention thinking being inward-focused and watching being outward?
It could be both, couldn't it? I mean, the beauty of this poem is that it doesn't offer any concrete answers. It leaves so much room for interpretation.
Absolutely. That ambiguity is one of the things that makes this poem so captivating. It invites us, the readers, to grapple with these questions, to define what thinking and watching mean to us individually.
And then just when you think you're starting to wrap your head around it, the poem throws another curveball. The speaker doesn't actually tell us what they're thinking about. They just leave it completely open, like a blank canvas for our own thoughts to fill.
Exactly. And that silence, that deliberate omission is so powerful. It's like an open invitation to turn inward and ask ourselves, what do I think about when I sit and reflect? What occupies my mind in those moments of quiet contemplation?
Okay, now that is a question I'd love to unpack a little bit. What about you? When you find yourself in that quiet space, what kind of thoughts tend to pop up? What goes on in that internal world of yours?
Oh, let's see. Well, I guess it's no surprise that my mind tends to gravitate towards, patterns and connections. I'm always looking for the links between seemingly disparate ideas, trying to understand how things fit together in the grand scheme of things. It's like my brain turns into this giant web of associations.
That's so you. You always find the connections, the underlying themes. I have to admit, my mind tends to wander down more whimsical paths. I'm more likely to find myself lost in daydreams, imagining stories, crafting little dances in my head.
Sounds delightful.
It is. It's not always productive, mind you, but it definitely helps me process my thoughts and emotions. It's like a way to sort through the clutter and make sense of things.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it just goes to show how these few lines from the poem can spark such different yet equally profound reflections. It's a testament to the power of poetry to tap into our individual experiences and illuminate the complexities of human thought.
This whole discussion makes me think about the concept of mindfulness.
Yeah,
We spend so much of our lives caught up in the whirlwind of our thoughts, constantly analyzing, planning, worrying about the future. This poem feels like a gentle nudge to step back from all of that, to simply be present in the moment, to observe, to reflect, to allow our minds to wander without judgment or expectation.
absolutely. It's about embracing what the poet John Keats called negative capability, that ability to be comfortable with uncertainty, with not having all the answers, to just sit with the unknown and see what arises. And sometimes the most profound insights come when we surrender the need to control our thoughts and just allow ourselves to experience the world as it unfolds.
It's like giving our minds permission to breathe.
Exactly. To breathe, to wander, to simply exist in the present moment.
This has been a fascinating deep dive, and I think we've uncovered some really insightful perspectives on this deceptively simple poem. So, as we wrap things up, what would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners today?
I think it boils down to this. Take a moment today, even just a few minutes, to simply sit, observe, and tell yourself what you see and think. Don't try to force it or overthink it. Just allow your mind to wander, to make connections, to experience the world without judgment. You never know what you might discover about yourself and the world around you.
Beautifully said. Until next time, keep those minds curious and happy reflecting.